welcome to another installment of School Matters. Today we're going to talk about two topics very much in the news these days, that our departments reliant on one another to fully function and have become integral to public education and society. I'm Leanne McIntire, and I'm talking about technology and safety and security. So joining me today are COO Scott Lempe. We have the Director of Information Technology, Joe Binswanger, and the Director of Safety and Security, Darrell Reyka. So gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me today.
Pleasure. Thank you.
All right, so Scott, why don't we toss it to you first and kind of get an overview from your perspective on the business side of the role of technology, safety, and security in education today.
Sure, and I guess as I was thinking about today's program, I was thinking about how interesting it is that these two departments happen to be together, because if they're not the most important things we do on the business side, they're certainly very close to the top of the list. We'll talk about safety and security in a minute, but for me, Darrell's mission statement is really pretty straightforward, and that is to provide safe places for teachers to teach and children to learn. There's a whole lot that goes into making all that happen, and we'll talk about some of those in a few minutes, but that's kind of the end mission statement. This summer, Darrell actually coined the phrase, education first, safety always. And I think that phrase is powerful because it really makes clear the link between school safety and security and a positive instructional program. On the technology side, I think technology is a great example of where the business of the district can impact instruction and, if done properly, do so in a profound way. One of the things I think that we try to balance every day is the difference between being reactive and proactive. And what I mean by that is reactive, responding to the technology demands of our students, teachers, and kids. Here's what I'd like to have, go get it. Proactive being, very often we find that Joe and his team will find a technology in the marketplace that teachers may not be aware of, but we say, gosh, this could have a real practical application in classroom, and so you pull the instructional program into that technology. I guess at the end of the day, though, technology is really just a tool that's intended to enable teachers, and if done so with the right implementation and with the right staff development behind, really can have a profound impact on kids and teaching and learning. Right now today we are in conversation with the school board, talking at least on the capital side about spending more money, at least as a proportion of the capital budget, in both these areas, safety and security and technology.
So part of this series has been based on the MGT study, which was an independent group that looked at the school district, and the technology department received quite a few commendations for how your business is run, how you run the department, how you support teachers. But first, what I'd like to talk about for our audience are the active boards, because that is a big part of the classroom today and has replaced a lot of other tools that teachers might use. So I'm going to throw that big one to you, Joe, and let's get started on that.
Thanks, Leanne. I was thinking about this in preparation for this, and one of the things that in some ways it's hard to believe, and in other ways really shows the impact it's had in the classroom, is that we're entering our 8th year that active boards have been in every classroom across the district. And to kind of put that contextually, this year's 7th graders have never known, considering they started with Sarasota County as kindergartners, have never known education without an active board in their classroom. Huge. That's pretty incredible.
Very different, yes. It's so, I mean, I remember, of course, the chalkboard.
Well, that's right. And so for them, and Scott was alluding to this earlier in the introductory comments, technology is just naturally what their expectation is, whether we're talking inside the classroom or outside the classroom. What the active board has really been able to do is bridge a variety of resources that teachers have to impact daily instruction, and beyond just daily instruction, the teachable moment. Many of our recent textbook adoptions, as part of the adoption process, the teachers that were part of the adoption committee looked at the digital resources that the textbook publisher were able to offer, and many of them came with interactive whiteboard lessons that naturally integrate into the teacher's classroom. An additional component that's part of the active board technologies that doesn't quite get as much press as the active board itself is all of our teachers have document cameras. And what a document camera in essence is it takes whatever's under the camera and projects it onto the board, allowing teachers to write on it. So think of a very fancy overhead projector that teachers typically used to use. Now they have this. The other piece that it does is there's nothing that's static any longer. And what I mean by that is if a teacher was teaching a lesson on the Pythagorean theorem and a student had to leave to go to the office to pick something up or use the restroom, once they left the classroom, whatever happened in that lesson, they missed. Now, while it's captured on the active board, the teacher has the ability to bring it back up when the student comes back into the classroom for a review, or print it out to send home as part of their individual education plan, or post it to their website. We have some teachers who've actually integrated their voice enhancement system with the recording features on the active board, where they're actually capturing their lessons for the day and then posting them to their website later that night for students to review, or even for parents to review before they head home from work, to be able to help their students with their homework that night.
What do I have to know today
That's
to get through?
So it really has impacted those variety of areas. I guess the last part that really speaks to kind of the adoption from the classroom teacher is at the rate at which teachers forget how to teach without an active board if the technology goes down for some reason during the day, and what a sense of urgency they have to have it back up. Fortunately, we have the staff trained to be able to get it back up in a very quick amount of time. The last piece I'd like to kind of focus on with the active boards is to make sure that everyone understands we made a sizable initial investment. And now, as we enter our 8th year, the only additional investment we've made beyond that is the replacement of the projector component of the active boards, which would be anticipated.
Yes.
But beyond that, the original investment that was done, we've far exceeded the anticipated return on investment for this technologies, which for the world of technology is a substantial place to be.
It is.
It's interesting that MGT happened to lock in on the active board, because right now today, the active board is no longer kind of the next generation technology. In fact, I think there's an expectation out there, probably across the country, on the part of parents, teachers, and kids, that there's some kind of smart technology in a classroom. That's just the basic expectation.
Right.
If you ask today, what is the kind of cutting edge contemporary technology, in our district you find that several places. One of them started with Dr. Paige Detman in the Tech Active classroom at our middle schools. And I would encourage your viewers, if they haven't had an opportunity to see Tech Active in action, I would encourage them to go to any middle school, ask the principal if they can see it. It is the single most powerful application of technology I've seen in a long time. What Tech Active is to the middle schools, TEL, or technology-enabled learning labs, now exist at the high schools. They are a collaborative learning environment that uses technology to support. It isn't about the technology, but the technology supports collaborative learning and collaborative conversation. And at the middle schools, we're piloting things like tablets, like Kindles, and so I guess my point is, while active board was something we were commended for, I think now today is just a basic expectation in every learning environment.
And I would even piggyback onto that to say it really began as a fundamental building block for our district in technology that future technologies have been able to build on, and it really set a clear expectation both from the student and the teacher and the parent as well. And really, Scott spoke about middle and high. In addition to that, we have some exciting things we're doing at the elementary level. From a district perspective, we're really trying to build a technology ecosystem, if you will, that is really the idea of living organisms, or our students and teachers interacting with non-living organisms, but the technology to enhance the learning that's taking place, and really building upon what we're doing at elementary to make them better prepared for middle school, to in turn make them better prepared for high school, and ultimately post-secondary opportunities.
College, the workplace. I mean, it really, as I said in the opening, technology impacts us in everything that we do, and so many of our students have never known anything other than, so it is one of those things we, school districts need to keep up with. And the active board, you no longer, as you said, have the overhead projector. You don't need the TV and the VCR.
That's right.
You don't need a lot of computers, because everything can be shared from the internet on the active board. Or now our new Tech Active classrooms, which we have several programs coming up on those, the middle school and the high school classrooms. So
You mentioned chalk a minute ago. My youngest daughter is a teacher, and I helped her move into her very first teaching assignment in a small elementary school in Annapolis, Maryland. And her classroom did not have active technology, any kind of smart board, and she kind of whispered to me, because the principal was in the room at the time, she said, "Dad, I'm not sure you can buy chalk anymore." And I tell you that story just as an indication of what the expectation of the young teachers coming out of college are today. They learn how to teach with technology as an aid.
So another commendation that you came up with was from how we have used technology on the administrative side, which both Joe and Scott can talk to, and probably even Darrell. So it doesn't just impact teachers and students, but it impacts everyone in the district. So why don't we talk a little bit about that?
Go ahead.
Well, I guess a couple areas. One area that we received commendations from MGT on is our utilization of video conferencing to really improve productivity of staff. And we use it on the instructional side as well, and I could give you a variety of examples how it's really impacted students and teachers. But today we're going to focus a little more on the administrative side. One area is the use of video conferencing to cut down on windshield time. It's hard to believe, but Sarasota County is 444 square miles, and instead of pulling administrators off school campuses for important meetings, we're able to keep them on their campus, still receive and communicate and interact with the information, but allow them to be there for security and safety purposes that only an administrator can.
Right.
It also cuts down on their travel time. And the in-county travel costs that the district would.
Or vehicles that we might have to provide.
Yep.
So we save quite a bit, all along the whole chain.
And our executive director of high schools, Steve Cantis, made a comment recently to me about what video conferencing has enabled him to do with his principals and assistant principals, is be able to have more regular, meaningful conversations, because they're having these regular meetings where before he may have canceled them because there wasn't enough content to be discussed that made sense to pull them from across the county to a central location. Well, let's jump online for a quick 30-minute video conference. We get to really dive into the data that we need to. It made sense, it was productive, and allowed them to still be on campus.
Right. Right. Darrell, how does any kind of video conferencing impact your department?
We do video conferencing a lot when we're looking at solutions, when we're working with vendors, rather than us needing to send someone to a trade show to look at new products, things like that. So we can do a lot of that with video conferencing today. The other thing is you talk about the importance of that infrastructure. Many of our life safety systems, like fire alarm systems and burglar alarm systems, ride on the technology today, where it used to be old phone lines. So.
Right.
Another area in administrative, which we've actually increased since the time of the MGT audit, is we've actually tripled the number of servers that we're virtualizing now. What that means for our general audience is, instead of buying physical components, so to speak, for technology infrastructure, we're able to virtualize them or make existing hardware act and feel like enhanced hardware through the advances in virtualized technologies.
So is that like the cloud?
In a way.
In a way, just for the viewer at home.
In a way.
Sort of like that. Okay.
Sort of like that, and you can easily Google virtualization. And there's tons of information out there.
Everything you want to know.
That's out there. But what that also allows us to do is, instead of, we can, a term in the virtualization world is spinning up a server, which means we can spin up or create a server virtually for a specified time period because of a project. And what it's allowed us to do is, instead of going out and spending $15,000 on a new server, we don't have to spend that money at all, because we're spinning it up for the time period that we need it, and then we spin it down into hibernation until we need it again. It's a savings on the capital, and it makes us more effective and efficient in what we're trying to do.
Okay, cool.
I think one of the most significant improvements that's been made on the administrative side in the last couple of years is our transition from Terms to ESD. And if you use those systems, you know what I'm talking about. Terms was kind of our business platform for a long time. We've been on Terms for 20 years plus, huh, Joe? About 2 years ago, we transitioned the business side, HR, payroll, and finance, from terms into ESD. Shortly thereafter, we began to transition both electronic gradebook and started to build both parent and employee portals. Those things are all today web-based. So in fact, this Sunday I was in the comfort of my living room watching a football game, approving personnel actions in this web-based technology. I can go out to the employee portal, as can anybody who works for the school board, and see what their next paycheck is going to be, look at their vacation balances. Parents, probably more importantly, can go out to the parent portal, and they can almost in real time track the progress of their kids. They can see homework assignment results and test results, and engage in their students' education rather than waiting for the report card to come.
Right.
Well, and if I could add to that, I actually recently got an email from a parent who was having some login problems with her parent portal, and we got her squared away, and her reply back was, "Thank you so much. This is my lifeline to my son's progress because she checks it on a daily basis." So there's no more, well, I didn't get the grade back from my teacher. No, they know immediately.
Right.
I know for me personally, I have 2 children in the district, and every Friday at about 6 o'clock, I get an email automatically generated out of the parent portal that tells me my children's grades for that week. It usually comes in around dinner time, and they know that around dinner time I'm going to be asking them, "So how did it go this week at school?"
And Dad
you
already
better tell
knows.
the truth.
Well, that's interesting because we tend to think of technology as distancing people, whereas what we've been talking about is it's actually opening communication and bringing everybody closer. So, right, you know, I mean, what high school kid ever told their parents what was going on in school, or even middle school? Elementary, a little more open, but so that's very good. And so one last thing on technology before we move into wrapping up with security is keeping up with new technology. Sort of leads us to security. People are familiar with their e-readers, tablets, smartphones. How are those impacting the classroom safety and security with all these new and constant changing technologies we have to worry about?
Well, Leanne, you're right. The world of technology changes at such a rapid rate. I often kid around and say, if you don't like what's happening in technology, go to bed, because tomorrow morning when you wake up, it'll be different. Really what Sarasota County Schools IT department is really doing right now is focusing on an extremely strong infrastructure to support whatever new technologies come out. Because if the infrastructure is in place, whether it's tablets, smartphones, laptop computers, or whatever Microsoft, Apple, Android is about to come out with next, Google, you know, we have an infrastructure in place to support that. We've started a very aggressive wireless upgrade program at all of our schools that will allow students to come in and be connected to a robust and reliable network that their teachers can count on to be able to deliver the type of instruction that they want to every day. Without that infrastructure in place, it doesn't matter what type of devices they bring in. They won't have a network to be able to support what they'd like to do.
Right. It's very much like having electricity, water, you know, power, all of those basic things that support everything else you do.
Right.
I was just going to say, when you think about infrastructure for the viewer, and I was talking to my wife about this weekend, if you think about, you're either going to plug your computer into the wall, into an IP, or you're going to access a wireless access point somewhere, that's one end of the process. At the other end is the application of the website or whatever you're trying to get to. All of the things between this point and that point, that's the definition of infrastructure. And as we move towards, or at least that's the layperson's definition, and as we move towards more computer-based testing, as we move towards more and more instructional material that Joy hit on already, that is web-based, the quality of that infrastructure becomes vital. Our superintendent tells Joe and I all the time, technology cannot be the reason a child doesn't pass her FCAT, and she's right. But it really does put a burden on that infrastructure, and thus a burden on us to make sure that that infrastructure is robust and reliable. Those are the right words.
Another way for viewers to kind of think of infrastructure is if the devices that we talked about were cars on the roadway, we need to make sure that we've built a roadway that can support the number of cars we anticipate on there and the lanes of traffic, so to speak, that we can. Everybody's probably been in Sarasota at a time when US 41's been under construction and it goes down to one lane and everything gets choked up. What we want to try and do is remove those one lane situations and allow traffic to flow freely, so to speak.
talk
Right.
about that a little bit from one of the keys to our infrastructure is fiber optics. Right now today we have fiber in all of our schools as a result of really a four-way agreement between us, Sarasota County government, the city of Sarasota, and Comcast. And that fiber really does enable a large part of that infrastructure. Joe, talk about this last summer and what happened in terms of bandwidth, if you will, as part of that. Part of the infrastructure.
Leanne, a year ago right now, our district as a whole had 120 meg pipe to the internet, so to speak. So for the viewers, they could think of it like it's the exit off ramp onto the main interstate, if you will, that school board traffic was going on to. In last spring break, spring of 2013, we increased that from 120 to 300 megs. And then in this past summer, we increased 300 megs to a gig worth of traffic, or a gig worth of bandwidth, burstable up to 10 gig. So
Okay.
what that means is we went, in essence, and multiplied by 10 our capability of where we were a year ago, and capable of multiplying it by 100 from where we were a year ago.
And if you need to, which would be critical in two ways. As you said, you know, teachers need the technology when they need it, and there's going to be certain times of days when we're all going to be trying to funnel into that bandwidth and get what we need done. And we certainly, you know that security is very dependent on that, and we don't want that to go down. So Darrell, how has your department kept up with technology for safety and security?
Well, we work very closely with the IT department on that infrastructure side. As we have built out our security over the past probably 10 years in the school district, we've gone from having probably 16 cameras 10 years ago to about 3,500 cameras today. They're all accessible at the school site because of the infrastructure on the network. They're accessible at our communications center.
Real time.
Real time.
Yep.
Being able to monitor all 3,500 cameras. We take them very seriously. Cameras don't do us any good if they don't work. We physically inspect the operation every day of all those cameras.
Wow.
If we have a camera that's out, it's our goal within 24 hours, if possible, to get that camera working. On any given day of those 3,500 cameras, we may have between 3 and 6 that aren't operational. So we really have a high uptime that we strive for on them. Many of our fire alarms today, our burglar alarms, report their signals by way of the network. So it's really important that that network
That's very important.
have the bandwidth and have the reliability behind
Right.
it, that it is there when we need it. So we have a really strong infrastructure security-wise that is dependent on that network.
For me, and just to kind of put that in context, there was, I was thinking about this over the weekend as we were preparing for this. There are probably 104, but 4 real big things I think that Darrell and his department do to ensure that our kids have a safe environment. The first is, as he's just discussing, physical security. Are our schools safe? Fencing, design, cameras, those kinds of things. Second is knowing something about the people that have access to our kids, whether that's teachers that we hire to work with them, volunteers, or visitors to the campus, knowing something about who's with our kids. Third, I think, is helping the schools plan in the event of an emergent situation. What are our expectations of you, and then helping you not only have the plan but execute the plan. And then I left the fourth one to the end because it's probably the single most important, and that is the operational piece of school safety and security really rests on our relationship with local law enforcement, specifically our SRO program. If there really is something that's happening right now, we look first and foremost to the SROs and then to local law enforcement to respond. And so those are kind of the 4 big things that I think Darrell deals with every single day. Physical security, knowing something about the people, planning, and working with the SROs to ensure our campuses are safe.
And I think the important thing is they all tie back to following emergency management principles. You know, there are 4 phases to that. You know, there's what can we do to mitigate risks? What can we do to be sure we're prepared to respond to those risks? How do we respond to those risks? And then the 4th one, how do we recover from those incidents that may happen? So those are critical. We try to focus our whole program around, it's not just fencing, it's not just having a crisis plan in a classroom. It's not just having cameras. It's really a comprehensive plan that all meshes back together. And our local emergency management people are key to this. We have really, really strong relationships with law enforcement, with fire rescue, and with our local emergency management people. And they assist us a lot in that mitigation piece and that response piece. So that relationship is really important to us.
Just this summer, I think the Superintendent Summer Leadership Institute, Darrell dedicated one entire day, and that's, as you know, that's a meeting that brings together all of the administrators in the district, both school-based and district, but we dedicated one full day to the topic of school safety and security, and every law enforcement agency, every fire department, emergency management, everyone in this county that has a role in helping us with school safety and security was physically there at that institute. It was just a neat way to show all the different pieces
Everything
and how
that
they all come
we
together
have,
and collaborate.
right, and that we do have a plan.
We do have a plan.
Right.
Scott touched a little bit about kind of controlling who has access to our
Yes.
campuses. I think that's really important. We teach all of our staff, especially in new employee orientation, everybody has a role in school safety and security. Everybody has an obligation to be observant to who's on a campus. Should they be on a campus? Have they have the proper credentials to be on a campus? And we have identification badges that are acceptable. Every employee has an ID badge. Every substitute teacher has an employee ID badge. Every visitor that comes onto a campus needs to have a visitor badge. Every visitor that checks in on any one of our schools is processed through a system we call Raptor. That checks against all 50 states for sexual predators, sexual offenders. If there are no issues, that person's issued a sticky badge with their photo on it that tells them where they're authorized to go on that campus. And then the other acceptable badge is law enforcement. Those are really the three acceptable badges that we allow on our campuses. And we ask our staff, if you see someone that doesn't have a badge, challenge that person. We don't want you to put yourself at risk, but maybe they just need directions to the office. You have a role in that. Every one of our employees has that role.
Right. Yes, and as we've seen through other incidents across different states, that it's not just what your plan might be, but it is that access and who is once they come past that fence, who are they? And then once we've decided who they are, we then sort of funnel and limit where they can go. Correct?
Correct.
They can't just walk right through.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
No. So, what else haven't I asked you about safety and security that you want to share with the public?
The one thing that's important is, we talked a little bit about, we have our crisis plans, or what we call our site emergency guides that are in every classroom, that we've tried to make very easy for employees, teachers, classroom aides to follow in an emergency. We have fencing, we're trying to accelerate more fencing, more gates. But the important thing is training, drilling, and exercises. You can have all those pieces, but if you don't train for them, and if you don't sit back then and say what worked and didn't work, and make adjustments to your plan, we're not being very effective. So I think we take that very seriously. We carry the message to our principals that during your drills, take them seriously. Let's evaluate what worked. Inject things into your drill. If you always do a fire drill the same way, maybe it's time to rethink that and say you're going to block an exit this time, because perhaps that's where the fire is. So we need to be creative, and then we need to work with our teachers and our employees and evaluate how can we improve those programs. That training and drill and exercise piece.
Great. All right, gentlemen. Well, we're out of time. I want to thank you very much for joining me today to talk about two subjects, safety and security and technology, that are so critical to our children's future and learning. Viewers at home, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you again on School Matters.